This is where Texas politics gets interesting. Here again are two guys named Jason, some great guests, and cold Texas beer for another smart conversation on Y'all-itics, the unofficial political podcast of Texas.
All right, we are back. Thanks everybody for being with us today. We're in a place we've never been before, and it's surprising.
We're on this camera right here, Wheeler.
I'm on all these cameras. There's like 5 cameras in here. I'm just going to keep doing this.
This is in downtown Dallas, and
yes.
We both lived here 15, 20 years.
Right.
And it's surprising. We passed this building thousands of times and have never been inside.
And we've talked to the people inside so many times too, but it's always been like remotely or on the phone or whatever. We're at ONCOUR, and this is right off the Woodall-Rogers Freeway, right there by the Clyde Warren Park. Everybody knows about that here in downtown Dallas. And we've got big news today. ONCOUR has done a first here in Texas, and so we're here to talk more about that because this is something you're going to be hearing about regardless of where you live in Texas. And we're joined by the Brain Trust today. We've got Brian. Don't laugh. That's true. That's absolutely true. We got Brian Lloyd here with us. He's the Vice President of Regulatory Policy for ONCOUR Electric Delivery. Now, so Brian, just for people who know, because people kind of get this, I think, confused a little bit. They think of their electricity company. You all are transmission and distribution.
That's right.
And the state's sort of divided up like a puzzle. It looks like puzzle pieces. And there's several big utilities like ONCOUR that do this. And basically, you all have the big lines, the ones that bring the power in, and then the electric company is the one that takes it to our house, and that's the person we pay.
Yeah, that's right. So we have the, as you sort of mentioned, Jason, big poles along the highways. You'll see kind of those as you drive the state. And then in your neighborhoods, you'll see the smaller lines. Those are ours as well. So we're just poles and wires. So no matter who your retail electric provider is, no matter who they're buying generation from, wind, solar, natural gas, that's all going over our lines, and we deliver it fairly and equally for everybody, no matter who your retail provider is.
And if you're in North Texas, you probably use the ONCOUR app quite a bit whenever there's severe weather. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So we're talking about resiliency. And if you've been in North Texas at least since, 2021? Is that when Winter Storm Uri was?
Yes.
Yeah, 2021. If you've been in Texas since 2021, then you know the importance of resiliency. And let's talk about the first that you guys are doing with this. Lay out what ONCOUR is doing here, because you guys are out of the gate early.
Yeah, you bet. So let's talk first. First off, nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Welcome to ONCOUR. I can't believe you guys have never been here before.
We always just dive right in.
Yeah.
So yes, hello.
And I know you guys have a beer thing. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, so we're going to kind of skip that in the
So the beers
ONCOUR
in the white
building
cups
here.
here. Yeah, that's right.
So before we get to resiliency, I want to ask you guys. So to honor the beer tradition, like what's been your most recent beer? What's been your jam of late for beer?
This guy drinks the same thing every time we go somewhere. The exact same thing. He's like an old man.
Yeah.
Very much. Yeah.
Close. No, it depends where we go. I like Manhattan Project, which is across the river.
That's right.
Yeah.
I had a Necessary Evil this weekend. That was my
that's my go-to.
That was my post-lawn mowing shower beer this weekend.
And
was
it's
a
a refreshing one, isn't it? It's a refreshing one. Yeah, it absolutely is.
I've been on a kick lately with, we went to a community beer recently as well. That's a good one right down the road too.
House beer.
I've been on a kick lately for sours.
Okay.
Weird, I know, different, but they've been good.
The other Jason likes fruity beers too, and he doesn't lie about that. It makes no.
I don't hide it. I don't apologize.
Yeah.
So my other one,
but I'm having ice water today.
So my younger son and I did the nerdy thing of going to see Revenge of the Sith, which is back in the theaters for the anniversary at Alamo Draft House over in Las Colinas.
Yeah.
512 Pecan Porter.
Oh,
We're
nice.
getting out of porter season, so it was a little sketchy,
porters.
but that is Austin Brewery 512. Fantastic.
That's a thick one. That's a winter beer, isn't it?
It's a little bit of winter beer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
a good porter.
Cold
is
movie
nice.
theater made it okay. Otherwise, it was not the post lawn mowing shower beer.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. I like how
warm.
we couldn't talk the corporate folks into allowing us to have beers here today, but we're going to sit here and talk about
That's
the
right.
beers.
And you'll notice I'm not at all looking at Carrie Dunn, who's I'm sure skyling at us right now. So.
I'm not looking at her either.
Back to resiliency. Resiliency you can think of a little bit different from the thing we talk about a lot in the electric industry of reliability. Reliability, pick a day like today. We're going to have storms later this week here in Dallas, but today's sort of a normal day. We want the lights to come on reliably, kind of every day people wake up, do what they need to do. Resiliency is sort of an evolving concept in the electric industry, which is really about when we have these big major events, whether it's a winter storm, whether it's the spring storms that we are used to kind of here in Dallas, whether it's wildfires, hurricanes on the Texas coast. The idea is what can we do to make the grid be able to take that punch better, have fewer outages, but then also be able to get back up quicker, get people restored faster. And resiliency, if you think, resiliency thing we think of in life generally, right? I mean, it's how do we become resilient people, resilient parents, resilient workers. This plan we've just kind of developed and are in the process of implementing is really about doing that for the local power grid primarily.
And the interesting thing is the legislature decided that this was, excuse me, was needed of all of the transmission and distribution utilities back in 2023 in their last session. So they, passed this law that said, hey, we need you guys to figure out how you're going to harden your systems, every one of you, figure it out for your area, bring it back to Austin, to the Public Utility Commission of Texas, of which you used to be the executive director. I did. And we'll, see if we can approve that and get you started. Interesting thing, though, is they did that, and then a year later, in 2024, in July of 2024, we saw the meltdown that happened in the Houston area with CenterPoint. That is sort of your peer down there. And it was just nasty. The derecho that they had there, 80-mile-an-hour winds, took down a lot of poles, took down a lot of limbs, which took down a lot of lines there. And 2.6 million customers were without power for days and days and days during July in Houston, which we all know is no picnic. There were bad communications there. There were bad timelines given there of when this was all going to be fixed. And you remember that whole thing where people couldn't work the map that CenterPoint had, and so they were relying on Whataburgers. Remember that? The Whataburgers that were lit up, that were open, were where they could see where power was.
Some indication of where power was,
How much did you all, when you were putting together this resiliency plan, how much did you all look at what happened there in addition to what's happened here in your area and go, okay, how do we avoid that?
Yeah, so if we you guys had mentioned Winter Storm Uri in 2021. Yeah. You remember most of that issue was around the generation side of the business, right? Power plants freezing, fuel supplies freezing. That week we did have kind of some ice storms in far east Texas. We back up. I mean, we serve, for people who don't know, have a service area the size of the state of New York. So we serve pretty much from the Texas-Louisiana border all the way to Midland and Odessa, Oklahoma border down to just north of Austin. So we have this massive, really, really diverse service territory. So in 2021 Winter Storm Uri week, we did have some ice storms in East Texas that have what people think of, I think, as the more traditional power outage, right? Trees crashing into the power lines, ice into the lines, things like that. Most of Winter Storm Uri was this generation shortfall. And we, as the wires company, when told, we kind of rotate people around to kind of make sure the whole grid doesn't collapse. So in 21, the legislature spent a lot of time on that piece, weatherization of power plants, some of the new market signals and things that the PUC kind of keeps working on, and then 23 we get to is like, well, Winter Storm Uri was an awful event, but that's not usually what causes people's lights to go out. It's the things, Jason, that you mentioned, the hurricanes, the windstorms, the ice storms, and things like that. And so we, with the legislature, sort of said, well, what can we do to make that better? And as you said, so legislature passes that bill in 2023. Governor signs into law in June. PUC has to do what's called a rulemaking, kind of set up some parameters for these plans. We were developing our plan in parallel with that. Because we actually thought it'd be helpful to the commission to say, look, here's what we're thinking about. And there's a bunch of different components we can kind of get into on that. And then they finalized that rule early 24, and we kind of filed the plan in May, kind of ready to go out of the gate there. So we jumped on it. We're really excited by it. Again, in the different parts of ONCOUR, we have different types of risks. And that was, I think, what was really smart about what the legislature did and then what the PUC implemented. Again, you think of a Houston, they did have the derecho, which is a little bit of a weird event. For them, that was kind of a hurricane, which they're used to, but it came from the north.
Yeah, spun up like that.
Spun up like that.
It's different when those winds come from a different direction.
It absolutely is. And we had, between the derecho and then Hurricane Beryl, we actually had some pretty significant, we had a series of storms here in Dallas kind of that week as well. It wasn't sort of one big storm, it was storm after storm after storm. Similar impacts, trees into power lines. You remember that storm? We knew a storm was coming. Our great meteorologist saw that. We didn't. Nobody saw it blowing up the way it did, in Richardson was kind of the hardest hit area there. Same thing, kind of hurricane force winds coming in from the north. We had a lot of rain in Dallas here, so we had trees kind of up outside of our right-of-way, and we'll talk about how we trim and manage that right-of-way to keep the trees out of it. We had trees falling into it from way outside. That was kind of the Houston problem.
Well, yeah, I don't think Houston, and not to spend too much time on that, but I don't think Houston had as an extensive vegetation management plan as ONCOUR did. And ONCOUR, I mean, ONCOUR learned its lesson 10, 15 years ago when the ice storm happened.
That's right.
And then you guys went out and sliced up trees to make sure it wouldn't happen again.
That's right.
And you guys have maintained that. Here's what I'm curious about, though. Your job is making sure the electricity flows. And it's in your best interest, even long before Winter Storm Uri, is to make sure the electricity continues to get to my house. You always have these mitigation plans. Why? How is the resiliency plan different from your regular mitigation plan that you guys have always had?
It's a great question, Jason. So what this plan lets us do is come in with a comprehensive, systematic plan, kind of by area. We designed ours around a substation. So you drive around, you kind of see those big kind of blocks of land where all the wires are coming out of. We're going to basically attack those substations one at a time and every distribution line that comes out of there. And by doing that, we can do everything at one time. I live in Northwest Dallas. You guys will remember, I think back 2019, 2020, we had the tornado up there.
Oh, yeah.
We replace older assets all the time after storms. And if you drive down Walnut Hill, what you're going to see, and you can tell them by the color, because they're more tan than they are dark brown, new pole, new pole, new pole, right where the tornado went, then you're going to see old pole. It's probably the conductor snap right there, so it didn't pull down that next pole, new pole, new pole, new pole. So we're going to fix all that as fast as we can in storm restoration, but then we still have a weak link there. We have that old pole that didn't get replaced in the storm. And so the idea behind these resiliency plans is let's not wait for the storm. Let's go systematically in throughout our system and fix everything at one time so that the whole line, the whole thing serving your neighborhood, that whole geographic area around that substation, everything is dealt with proactively at one time. Ahead of time. This will tend to be the older parts of our system, right? You guys know DFW is booming. Where we build things new, we build it with a lot of this technology and hardened systems in there. This plan's really about going back to the older parts of our system. Again, my part of Dallas, perfect 1960s homes, 1960s infrastructure, both water and I'm getting to do sewer lines in my house, which is always kind of fun. And this sort of reached its end of life, and again, we can wait and do them one at a time when we have a storm, or we can do them systematically and proactively, and that's the whole point of the plan.
Sorry, Brian, when you say that you're starting and going substation by substation, how much does that include? You're not replacing the substations, are you? Are you just looking at specific components?
Yeah, in some areas, so let's move to West Texas, right? We've got some areas where we have some pretty old infrastructure. It's been reliable, but the structure for the substation is actually wooden.
Oh, wow.
And when you think of wildfire risk, as we were putting this plan together, you mentioned Hurricane Beryl. That sort of happened while we were, kind of right after we had filed the plan. What had happened while we were developing was the Smokehouse Creek fire up in the Panhandle, which was caused off of another utility's assets up there. And so we have a big chunk of our plan that's West Texas focused. So in that case, we're going to be really rebuilding that whole substation. But for most of the plan, what we'll be doing is we're going to go do inspections of these facilities. We're not going to replace something that doesn't need replaced, but we're going to go make sure that we get all the vulnerable pieces of equipment at what time. So that may be poles. That may be in some areas where we've had a lot of growth and maybe switching out the wire itself to where it can carry more capacity. In a lot of cases, it'll be putting in what we call grid automation equipment. So that's things where we can remotely operate and reconfigure the grid, or in some cases, it'll do it by itself automatically. So that when we have the storm, the system can figure out where is the outage and then reconfigure power around that.
Interesting, on its own.
On its own. So what that means, so remember I talked about resiliency, is two things. It's withstanding the storm. So the stronger pole is going to withstand the storm. The bigger wire is going to, when it's really hot or really cold and everybody either cranks up the air conditioner or cranks up the heater, that's going to help in those events as well. This grid automation will really help us then get off the mat quicker. So we can take an outage that would have been 1,000 customers, maybe that's now only 100 customers. Maybe it's 10 customers. And we can segment the system in that way.
Sorry, I keep stepping on you here, Brian, but to make sure I'm clear, why did you need permission from the legislature to do this?
So most of regulation in Texas for electric utilities is kind of backwards looking. It's a little bit kind of weird, right? And it's not the way any other business would kind of work. It's not the way probably you work for your house when you set your annual budget and think about what do we need to spend money on this year. It's just the way it's evolved, and it's backwards looking. And so what we wanted to do is have an opportunity to go present this forward-looking plan to the commission, and basically say, do you agree these are the right risks to tackle for us in the right parts of our system, and is this the right types of investments to make, and have some alignment at the front end of this that we think that's great for customers, we think that's great for reliability, we think that's great for businesses. When we have these, mentioned Houston, these sort of week or 2 week long outages, huge economic impact there. So let's present these plans again, utility by utility, and get alignment that this is the thing worth spending money on, because we're going to spend a lot of money on it. We're going to spend about $3 billion over the next.
I was going to ask about
4 years.
that. So $3 billion over the next several years to do all this hardening. People who pay the bill at home are going to be thinking, "Oh God, this is going to be tacked onto my bill. What's this going to mean for me?" What does that mean?
Yeah, when we're fully implemented, about 2028, the plan, everything else equal, and there'll be a lot of things that change between now and then. If we grow more customers, that'll change what rates are. It'll be between $3 and $4 a month for a typical residential customer. Okay, so it's an impact on our customers. We know it. We know nobody likes the price increases. But what I ask you guys and everybody else to think about, again, you think of these big storms, where I think I read this morning, the average grocery trip in Texas is about $300. Okay. So $3 a month, $4 a month, that's $48 over the course of a year. Any number of stories in Houston or in Dallas or in Austin or San Antonio, when we have these storms of single moms struggling who now have a refrigerator full of groceries they have to throw away. People who have to go to hotel rooms after a couple nights because either they have home medical equipment or just need someplace else to stay. And that's the evaluation we did with the commission, is say, this is going to cost our customers at the end of this plan $3, $4 a month. But we're gonna estimate for you what the number of reduced outages and number of reduced minutes are once we go harden these systems. And we're going to value what people then aren't going to lose in groceries or lost productivity or businesses being closed. And so that cost-benefit analysis was part of this plan that we presented to the commission and all of our customers.
Well, what is the savings? What is the savings?
I don't have the numbers with me, but I mean, we've got. Let me sort of break apart kind of the priorities in the plan, because I mentioned wildfire. We've got. You guys follow the industry well enough to know whether it's California, Colorado, again, Smokehouse Creek wildfire. Sure. That's a unique risk for utilities, right? Most of what we're talking about when we talk about resiliency in storms are the things that crash into our system, cause an outage. The wildfires are things that actually our system can cause, right? So whether that tree goes in or there's some piece of equipment that malfunctions, wind is a great one. That was the case up in the Panhandle for Smokehouse, right? So a pole collapses or wires slapping each other, gets a spark, hits the ground.
That was a huge fire too.
Main acre wildfire, biggest in Texas history. Okay, so. In that case, then, in addition to customers not having power, you have all this property damage. You have up in the Panhandle, animals, LA, you've got just homes kind of burned to the ground.
Neighborhoods, yeah.
So we actually made that our first priority. Now, when you look at just the number of minutes we save for outages for that, that's the lowest value. But what we're preventing is all this other property damage for our customers and communities and other places. That became priority number one, just because as we have seen these events around the country, it's kind of a very highest priority, both for community safety, for us not to cause that damage. That's our number one priority.
And for your survival too. I mean, there's a huge liability in that, and that can put you out of business entirely. And then, what are you doing? Starting from zero.
That's right. And utilities that have had big wildfires and then gotten into financial distress, it's not good for anybody at the end of it, right? I mean, customers end up paying more money because the utilities credit is trashed and interest costs are higher and all that.
So it's almost $1 billion of that $3 billion.
So $1 billion of the
$3
billion is kind of wildfire focused. Now it's got the other benefits, right? So when we strengthen the pole so that it doesn't fall over in a windstorm and create a wildfire, well, it's also going to help us in the ice storm or the winter storm or the spring storm, things like that. Then we have a set of smaller set of investments that are we call them our underperforming areas. They're parts of our system that just tend to have persistent problems. A lot of those are in East Texas or Central Texas. And it's where you can, if you sort of think of the grid as a network, we've got parts of our network that really are sort of we call them a radial line. Think a single extension cord. Those are the ones, because we can't reroute power, can tend to have repeated outages. It's kind of time for us to bring reliability benefits to those customers the same as everybody. So that was kind of number 2. Let's go solve those customers that have the most persistent problems. And then third is this cost benefit analysis. You'll see as you look at some of the materials that we'll produce on this as we implement this plan, those will then tend to be our urban areas. DFW, kind of the Waco area. Simple reason for that is we serve a lot of customers out of every one of those substations. Okay, we have those are the areas of our system where we talk about customers per mile. West Texas is where we talk about miles per customer, right? So those are the most expensive ones to do. So again, there's fewer benefits on customer minutes. In the urban areas, that's where we're going to see a lot of the big economic value for that. And we'll follow up. We'll get you guys some additional information on the estimate that we gave the commission.
I noticed that one of the priorities is overhead underground resiliency and modernization, as you all call it. We hear this all the time from people who are having outages, even after a big storm like Beryl or the derecho, which I think I kind of combined together there in Houston, even though they were very separate things. People always ask, why don't they just bury these power lines? Like, why do we keep putting it back up again just to get it knocked down again? Does that address some of that?
So we have about 28, I think, % of our system is undergrounded. When we have new subdivisions going in, you'll tend to see those being undergrounded. Now the reason for that is because the home developer is really paying for that.
It's expensive.
It's because it's expensive. Now, it's also when you do it new, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Because there's no roads there yet. It's easier to trench.
You don't have to tear anything up.
We looked as part of this plan, okay, what would it look like to underground parts of our legacy system? Again, my part of Dallas, wires go down the alley. The alley's in rough shape to begin with. It's got gas pipelines running underneath it as well, because our area was the area that Atmos had to replace all those gas lines from the explosion a couple years ago. Very expensive to do. And ultimately what we found is even where it's sort of penciled out kind of on the cost benefit, we could do more by really just strengthening it from an overhead perspective.
Okay. So you can make it almost just as strong overhead if you do it right?
For the types of risks that we have, yes. We don't have typically Category 3, Category 4 hurricanes, right? So when you think of a Florida that has done a fair amount of undergrounding, some of our coastal utilities are going to do probably a little bit more undergrounding than we are. We just found we don't really need that. We can do stronger poles, even stronger wood poles in many cases are sufficient for the risk that we have. And then what we can do is get more bang for that buck. And we can get more customers, better quality service by focusing on how do we harden and then segment and automate that above ground system, again, where when the outage comes, it's not your whole street, maybe it's half the street, maybe it's just a couple homes.
And this is the most money being spent, $1.83 billion for what Jason asked about, the overhead and underground resiliency and modernization. Does this mean that you guys are going to be in my alley soon replacing some of my poles in the coming years?
So we will, through the course of this 3 years, I think we are tackling around 400 substations. We're going to notify customers ahead of time when that work is coming, and there'll be other work that comes with it. It'll be some vegetation management. We're going to get the trees trimmed on an accelerated basis. Use some new technology for that as well. But yeah, ultimately for the parts that need fixed, we're going to be in alleys. We may be in backyards, and so we're going to do our best to notify people and kind of know that we're coming, and that at the end of this process, which will have some degree of disruption, we'll need to take some outages as we replace some of this equipment. Again, we're going to do our best to notify people, make sure that they can make other arrangements when they need to. But at the end of it, the system is more resilient.
Do not pass him your address. They will be there eventually.
They've been at my house a few times. Let me ask you about wildfires one more time here. Jason and I talked about this not too long ago. I think we did a podcast on this. I did not realize the wildfire risk in Texas.
It's huge.
And how big it is. And I believe the story we were talking about is outside of California.
Depending on who you ask, Texas is second or third for the
greatest
risk of wildfire in urban area. It's a wildland urban interface.
I always have
to think
the
of that.
WUI is what I've heard people call it.
Is it that much of a concern for you guys?
I think even when you talk about wildfire risk, you have to contextualize it, right? Because you have different types of wildfire risk in different areas. The worst wildfire and most concerning are these urban interfaces. particularly when you think of, again, sort of the LA fires. I lived in Austin for 20 years. You think of that west side of Austin where you've got homes on canyons, right? And it says the winds will come through up through the canyons. That's where you can get the fires going really fast. Actually, in 2011, we had sold the house, but the first house we owned in Southwest Austin, that street, our neighbors to the right of us, house burned down.
Oh, wow.
One to the left of us burned down because, again, we were on this sort of bluff that came down here. Fire started behind a gas station, raced up the hill there.
That's their nightmare scenario there in Austin.
That's a nightmare. That is their nightmare scenario in Austin, correct. You then get to the Bastrop fires that they had in 2011.
Sure. Huge. A
little bit different there. Pine, right? So when you have pine beetle kills and a lot of dead pine trees, those things go up pretty quick as a lot of fuel. That's Colorado. Some of the West kind of has that issue. We have a big wildfire risk. It's a little bit different than that. We just have West Texas that tends to be dry and arid. Doesn't tend to be a lot of trees. There's miles per customer, customers per mile. Trees per mile is probably also the assessment in West Texas there. So what we worry about is a lot of the grasslands, brushes. The bad fire up in the Panhandle was in the Canadian Breaks area. That's got a little bit more of this elevation and topology change. So again, we're a little bit different of a risk there. So a lot of what we'll be doing is making the system, having new devices in there that are less likely to cause a spark. That's a big part of it. We'll do a lot of clearing around our assets as well. Basically clear all the grass, clear anything that's flammable around there so that if they're, again, part of resiliency is events are going to happen, how do we make them not be severe? So if there is a spark, let's have it fall on dirt rather than fall on a bunch of dry grass.
I want to ask you about something on the list here. I mean, we get into a lot of the natural problems that can occur and cause power outages and things that you all are going to harden. Let's talk about one that's not natural, and that is cybersecurity and line security, substation security. We've seen the reports over the past several years of people shooting up substations. We've seen the reports that foreign actors are in our grids, that they have gotten in there and they're sort of sitting there waiting for the right time. How much focus goes into that right now? And we can read some of the outlines of your plans, and you all will be putting out more detail. Are there things, though, that we won't know about that you all are going to have to get in there and do? Yeah,
so we've got two components of this plan, as you mentioned. One is sort of a cybersecurity piece, and let me back up and give some context to that as well. We certainly, everybody, you guys and everybody has cyber issues, right? We've got phishing attacks, we've got people trying to steal financial information, we have hostile actors trying to infiltrate critical infrastructure, be that water systems, electric systems. So we have that today. I mentioned this grid automation, right? So we can do use this great new technology to help the system heal itself, to help us remotely operate the system when we need to for safety or for reliability or for outages. But each of those devices is then also connected, in essence, to the internet. So what we have for a big part of our plan is really hardening that communications backbone, both from weather events, right? Because we use, in parts of rural Texas, cell towers and cellular broadband for a lot of this communication. Weather can take those out too. We ultimately decided what we wanted to do was have our own private broadband network that we could control, we could manage the cybersecurity of, and not be reliant on trusting that others would do that. So that's the biggest part of our cyber plan on this, in addition to, again, doing some other hardening of our data centers, continuing to evolve our cyber posture so that we are just sort of always on top of what are the current things the bad people are trying to do to our grid. The other one I'll mention is physical security. You mentioned reports of people shooting up substations. In some cases, that's my joke is some cases that's Bubba with a shotgun and board on a Saturday night, and in some cases there have been nationwide incidents where that appears to have been intentional. We have people who are trying, because copper is valuable, go into our substations and try to steal copper. And that's, of course, intensely dangerous to them.
Yeah, I would never think to go there and try to get it from there.
To a substation. And it's also dangerous to our workers, because what can happen is they can pull the grounds out as they're trying to find copper, and then all of a sudden the substation is now dangerous for anybody to kind of operate in. So we've got a bad actor thing. We also have a just safety thing. So we're going to also do some physical security controls, some additional access controls, fencing, both for ballistic gunfires on some of the more valuable equipment that's hard to replace, but also just have better situational awareness around those. Not going to be a whole lot of public details about what exactly we're doing there, but that's an increasingly high focus of us, is both for safety of the public, but also just for reliability, because again, some of this equipment it can be fairly long lead time. Part of the plan is as well to kind of have some additional spares and things like that. So spares is another way you deal with resiliency, so you have the additional equipment kind of available. Like you guys, you got a spare Jason. So naturally resilient.
He's the other Jason. I'm the spare Jason.
Naturally resilient podcast here. When something happens to one Jason, you got another one ready to go.
It happens a lot. I've done quite a few of these alone this year, so yeah, it does work out.
He hasn't been MIA this year. We mentioned the term vegetation management, and I know that's probably a corporate term that someone paid a lot of money to actually get. But this
tree
means
trimming.
This means tree trimming. This means I live in a part of Dallas where we have a lot of old trees. And I remember after the ice storm 10, 15 years ago, they came in and just, made a V so the lines wouldn't be impacted by it. I think that you guys have been keeping up with this pretty well. I mean, it's pretty clear when I drive through even, parts of North Dallas where you're talking about, there aren't really a lot of issues there, but you're talking about using technology now.
Right. Yeah.
To prevent this. Tell me what this is about.
Yeah, so I'll give you two pieces. One is we have focused in recent years, again, think of the major roads you drive on every day, and along the side, sort of the poles, the sort of bigger, probably taller poles in your neighborhood. It's what we call our main line, right? That's the things come out of the substation, and then everything feeds off of that. So we have really focused on doing responsible, frequent vegetation management there. It's had great impacts on customer reliability. Because when that line goes down, it takes out a bunch of people, okay? When you get deeper in the neighborhoods, that's where we identified a need to sort of beef up our tree trimming kind of there. We spend about $55 to $60 million every year. We're going to about triple that as part of this plan. Wow. Again, some of that's for wildfire. But as you said, add in some technology pieces that we have started to use on our transmission system first, and now we're going to move into our distribution system. And what this will let us do is use things like remote sensing, satellite imagery, better data about what types of trees are growing, what the sort of how much rainfall there's been in an area, all these sort of advanced, I'll use the buzzword of AI type technologies to give us a sense of, rather than just say we're going to go trim everything 5 years, have a sense of what's most likely to have been growing the fastest. And then again, use some of this remote sensing and imagery to where when we dispatch the crews, they kind of know where they're going, as opposed to having to drive the whole line and then kind of figure out, oh, there's the tree that needs trimmed, right? So that's going to make the process, we're going to spend a lot more money on it, but it's also going to make it more efficient as we do it, to where we can target the areas that have the fastest growing first. And maybe there's an area that hasn't grown as fast, we can wait another year on that, because it's not impacting reliability.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you all have arborists who are part of the teams here, because I remember when you guys got aggressive with this years ago after the ice storm, some people went nuts when they saw those trees being trimmed in the neighborhoods, and this is one of the guys who was blowing up your phone lines. He was blowing up your phone lines.
But they did a good job.
Yeah, so you mentioned the V. So the V is kind of one cut.
Yeah.
Well, there's some other ones that are kind of L.
Right up into the line.
Yeah. And so those are actually, you mentioned the arborist, that's actually the healthy way to do it.
Yeah.
Right, because the last thing we want to do is go do the vegetation management and then we kill the tree, right? So our arborists are out there on every one of these projects, every one of these kind of trimming crews, kind of identifying, well, what's the healthy way to trim that? Now, does it look great? Well, no, but we got to have
your lights on.
You got to keep the lights on. And that, you mentioned, I was at the PUC for years. Nobody likes the tree trimming until the storm comes, and then they want to know why the trees didn't get trimmed, and then 18 months later want to know why the trees are getting trimmed. So,
they heard about it in Houston. For sure.
We know it's a thing that customers both they value. Sure. When it hasn't happened and then the storm happens.
It's a great point.
It's also people love their trees. Again, we've got this, I live in this part of, we got great trees in Northwest Dallas. We just need to keep them out of the power lines.
You gotta have the power lines too.
Public announcement. If you're looking to plant some trees, come to our website, we've got some resources on what are the right trees to plant if you're kind of close to the power line, because there are plenty of beautiful trees that can grow that don't become a risk of growing up into the power line.
No sense adding one that's right there that's going to become a problem down the road.
Right tree, right place.
You invoked AI just a moment ago, and I'm curious because when you all put this whole hardening plan together, this resiliency plan, you looked at, what, 2 decades worth of data to figure out where the problems were and what the problems were. How much did AI play a role in that? That sounds like an enormous amount of data to go through.
It's an enormous amount of data. I don't know that there was an AI component of that, but yeah, I mean, we had a consultant come in and do this just really amazing work to take 20 years of weather data from the National Weather Service, and then we layered over our customer outage records on top of that. So, I mean, everybody sort of intuitively knows, hey, these are the types of things that cause outages, but to have that be data supported by, we actually took these sort of 50 mile by 50 mile grids and actually looked at it that way. So again, that's what that told us in East Texas. It's these ice storms in particular, it's the wind storms. When we get to West Texas, less of an issue there, but we've got more wildfire risk. Flooding's tends to be a huge cause of outages for us, but it really let us get down to this granular level of figuring out, well, which substations are we seeing are the most vulnerable to this type of weather? And then let's go in and kind of attack those. You mentioned the overhead system. There's some underground system issues as well. I mentioned as people have, people's homes have both become more efficient in terms of how they use electricity, but also have more stuff that consumes electricity, right? So we have one of those paradoxes, right? That as it becomes more efficient, we tend to use more of it. And as people have electric vehicles and maybe home battery systems as well, even on our underground system, the older parts of it, we see that when, again, we get these really hot summer periods or the really cold winter periods, that system can become vulnerable as well. We had mentioned undergrounding before. Undergrounding systems are great in the windstorms. When they fail, they can be very difficult to diagnose where it is. So part of what we'll be doing is, again, some of this segmentation even on the older underground system, to where if there's a problem, we can more quickly identify, well, here's where it is, and it's not the whole street. We're segmenting it to where we can feed part of the street from someplace else.
Wow. I have 2 last questions here. The first is, I'm going to ask you at the same time here to give Jason.
I love when you have multiple last questions.
But how long is this going to take to enact the resiliency plan? How long am I going to see the $3 to $4 extra on my monthly bill? That's the first of the last.
Okay. So there's kind of 2 components of the plan. This first plan is this kind of, it's called 4-year period. We started off as 3, spread a little bit into a 4th year as part of resolving the case at the PUC. So that first set of work will go on. We have the ability to go in and amend this plan and add on additional years and additional investment there. So that piece of where we do what we call capital, right? So it's the pole, the wire, it's the physical asset. That's going to eventually just go into rates like we do anything else.
Okay.
And so those costs get spread over the life of the asset, 30, 40, 50 years. Then in the short term, these additional costs around tree trimming, for one, what we call kind of the sort of cost of the new workers, the new inspections, things like that. That'll have a shorter period of, I think the case we just finished at the PUC is going to have that spread over like 12 months or so. So some of this will at some point roll into just what we collect in rates, because if these investments do what we think they're going to do, we think it will just become part of how we continue to operate, upgrade, maintain the system. And so over time, what this cost will be hard to discern from just what's generally the cost of the system. So you can think of, again, the tree trimming things are a shorter term recovery to kind of get that, and then everything else is just spreading over the long-term life of the assets the way we do.
And the whole goal of this, I presume, is that I don't see any interruption at all, and that seems like what's paramount in this. But am I going to see physically any of this work happening in my neighborhood?
Your specific neighborhood, we can kind of figure out for you what it's going to be there. But again,
he's going to pass you his address.
Over the life of this, you're going to see our workers out there, our contract crews out there, inspecting the poles, replacing some of them. In some cases, you'll see the new devices and new equipment going up on that pole with the more traditional stuff. Over the next 3.5 years or so for this first round, and then we'll see how it works. How much more we need to do going forward.
And for the record, Brian, that was the sequel to the 2 last questions, that last one that we got there. So,
I think the last question is going to be, but when is my house, Brian?
One more time,
Brian.
House, Brian.
Don't kill the electricity.
So let's say that right now, on any given storm or whatever, I'm without power for maybe 2 days. Have we figured out, mathematically what it looks like after all of this is said and done, how long I might be out?
And we did that analysis for the commission, again, sort of on average. Again,
I'm not going to ask you to guarantee it.
Every storm is different, right?
Yeah.
And it's so I'll use those storms we had last year as an example. We have some good friends who live up in the Richardson area, hardest hit area there. They actually were able to stay at a friend's house that was out of town, so they had kind of a place to go. But they kept calling, saying when the light's going to be back on. And so I was able to go into our system and say, well, we've restored your power technically 5 times, right? Because we start from the thing that's causing the most outages, we fix that. Yeah. And then there's another problem, we fix that. They're sort of called nested out. Think of the old Russian stacking dolls, right? Yeah. They were stacked like 5 times. And ultimately, when they went back to their house and took a picture of the reality, it's like, well, your neighbor's tree is in the line. Yours will be one of the last ones, right? So when it's the tree from your neighbor right next door, that's going to be the longest thing to fix. But part of this will be, okay, so if we can then reroute that power from the right side that it normally comes in to the left side, then you can get power back. Maybe just it's a blip at that point. And I'll get your address. We'll go see kind of how many blips that you've had that maybe you didn't even notice. Because as we do more and more of this automation and more of this, what we call the self-healing grid, there'll be outages, but you won't really notice them right now. Where the tree is crashed, we're going to have to go kind of fix the actual infrastructure there. But again, we can reconfigure this. That's the minimizing the event when it happens. Because to your point, I can't promise there won't be storms. We're not going to promise there's not going to be storms. Right. Okay? They're going to be those things. How do we make it both withstand that, but then when that happens, we can get people back online quickly.
So you guys are first with this. We will see how this goes. Have you heard from others, like the Center Points in Houston? Again, don't mean to beat up on them at all, and I think I did conflate Beryl and the derecho, but they've been through both, and both caused a lot of damage. Have you heard from others saying, hey, can we kind of look at some of the stuff you did too?
Yeah, I bet you did after with the vegetation management alone.
Yeah. So we most of the utilities have plans that have either been approved by the commission. I think CenterPoint's may be the last one that's underway. They kind of had a plan filed actually right before we filed ours, but then pulled it down because they determined they need to take kind of a fresh look at it after Beryl. So their plan's going on now. Theirs is a bigger plan than ours and more expensive, but because I think they've got more undergrounding in it. Yeah. Again, when you think of hurricanes
on the coast,
that's going to make more sense for them in some areas that we do. But yeah, we sort of considered what we did somewhat open source, and happy to help other utilities develop these plans as well.
My last question now.
There's more?
I didn't say that was my last one. My last question is, do you worry about the things that maybe you missed when you put this whole thing together? And how high stakes is this? I mean, we saw what happened after the things in Houston, and lawmakers and leaders all the way to the very top here in Texas were investigating, pulling them before the legislature, et cetera. This can get very political.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think everybody in this building every day thinks about what are we not thinking about, right? What's the risk that's out there that we haven't even quite identified yet? I'll tell you, some of the physical and cyber risks are the ones that we know are out there, and we just have to be constantly upping our game on that, because we know bad people are constantly upping their game on that as well. I think when we think about the big risks across our service territory, I'm going to tell you the wildfire is one for me. I mean, just sort of we are constantly evaluating new technology out there. We are constantly, we're really excited about some of the enhanced modeling we're going to do for wildfires, actually helping to share that with the state. I don't know if you guys have ever talked to Nim Kidd, who's this disaster guru that we are blessed to have here in Texas. Nim and I sort of chatted in Austin a couple of weeks ago. How can we take some of the data that we're going to get to where we are identifying, well, where's the bad weather risk that if there's a wildfire, for whatever reason, it could be a truck driving a chain, it could be something off a utility system. The modeling we're going to have is going to help us know where is that going to spread the fastest. So when you think about how can we get that data to the state, so as they're positioning response assets, right? The best wildfire is one that doesn't happen. The next best one is the one that gets extinguished like that. So if we can use this data to help them position those assets, you don't get 1 million acres that burn down in the Panhandle. So continuing to think through, what are those public-private partnerships that we can do with our first responder communities and some other things. I'll do a big push for, or big props to our, we have a charitable foundation called the ONCOUR Cares Foundation. After Smokehouse, that foundation went and gave a bunch of grants to the volunteer firefighting departments in our kind of more wildfire-prone areas.
They need it.
Because you heard, if you listen to any of those hearings, man, these things, they do bake sales, right, to try to raise money for their equipment. And the states, and we're advocating for this, looking like they're going to really fund a lot of upgrades to volunteer firefighters. We need them. We don't have a fire department here at ONCOUR, right, when there's a wildfire. So we need our local communities to know what we know and then be equipped to be able to respond to that. And so our foundation bridging that gap a little bit for the legislature to act, we were pretty excited by. But again, that's the kind of thinking that we're sort of always doing here. Again, identifying what is this new technology out there that we can apply. How can we use things like AI to, when we see a storm coming in, be able to better predict, well, all right, the damage is going to be there. And again, the system will be harder and we'll be smarter as how to solve that. But how can we now at some point can know, here's where we need to focus the crews and position them ahead of those storms. And that's kind of the exciting stuff that's coming. But as we said on cyber, all of it comes with risks. So our job is constantly balancing costs and risks and reliability, and everybody here in this building is dedicated to that every day.
It's good insight. Brian Lloyd's Vice President for Regulatory Policy at ONCOUR Electric Delivery. And next time we do this, we'll go to Manhattan Project.
Let's do it.
Right across the river. We'll make sure we get permission from
Did you hear Carrie sigh?
Yeah. People on camera are laughing and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Brian, thanks for having us over.
Enjoy it, boys.
Really appreciate it.
It's great.